Well, good morning and welcome to HSABC's webinar, Evictions, Protections and Support for Tenants During the Coronavirus Outbreak. My name is Sarah Kift and I'm your host for today, so that's the face to match the voice that you're hearing right now. And I'm just going to run a quick poll here to find out a little bit more about who you are and what your role is in your organization. So just take a minute to fill this out. I've only given you an option to choose one, although I know that a lot of us, especially in this sector, have many hats. And if you chose other, please type that into the question section and let me know what your role is. This really helps us to tailor the content of this webinar and to get a sense of who we're talking to. All right, so it looks like we've got quite a number of caseworkers and counselors on the line today. Well done for being here, you guys, and some support staff, always crucial, as well as the managers and supervisors, and we're all in this together. And we've got some housing planners on the line, we've got some practicum students, we've got some funding partners, affordable housing planners with various municipalities, so it's great to have the variety here today. Please share your experience and especially what you're dealing with right now. We'd love to hear from you. And this is the best part. You get to meet your instructor, Andrew, for today. He is the Executive Director of the Tenants Resource and Advisory Center. And he started at TRAC in 2010, and he's been the director since 2013. And he was also on the Vancouver Renters Advisory Committee and the PovNet Board of Directors and the Residential Tenancy Branch Operational Stakeholders Committee. And he's always worked in the nonprofit sector. And I know right now, Andrew, your phone lines both at home and at work are kind of going off the hook, hey?
They are, yeah. There was, every day this is an evolving situation. And I know last week, early in the week, there was a lot of anticipation for the announcement that eventually came on Wednesday, but even since that announcement was made, we're still waiting for everything to become official and be made effective. So yeah, I know it's been a tough past week on our staff, and obviously a lot, all the renters who are calling us just because of the level of uncertainty and oh boy, just unprecedented times we're facing with right now. So yeah, I was very happy to put together this presentation on the fly. And again, some of what we'll talk about is we're still sort of waiting to become official, but yeah, I hope the content is useful for those of you who have joined us today. Cool. So hopefully most of you know about our organization, TRAC, the Tenant Resource and Advisory Center. We've been around since 1984, promoting the legal protection of residential tenants all across the province by providing information, education, support, and research on all things residential tenancy law related. So just to give you a quick rundown of our services, because they've obviously been impacted by COVID-19, all staff are currently working from home. So our tenant info line, our phone services in general run through the internet. We have VoIP phone services, so all of our same office administrative and tenant info line numbers are still active. So I can give the contact information at the end of the presentation here, but we have our admin line. So if you wanted to reach my extension, for instance, we have our number 604-255-3099. Again, my extension's 222. All of those numbers are still functioning. And yeah, our tenant info line is still running the same hours. We're thinking possibly about increasing our hours, but right now it's still functioning at the same level as it was before. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, it runs from 1 till 5 p.m. in the afternoon. And then on Wednesday, we have a special evening shift run by volunteers, usually law students or lawyers. And so that runs from 5:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Direct advocacy has obviously been impacted. We have two programs where we represent clients at the residential tenancy branch level first off. So those are dispute resolution hearings in front of an arbitrator at the tenancy branch level. We also have a new housing law clinic where our lawyer Susanna Modrovic does judicial reviews primarily, and so that's at the Supreme Court level. But she also does some other stuff, and we're still sort of defining the mandate of the clinic, but she'll do some other stuff around enforcement of monetary claims at small claims court. We've talked about taking on some non-RTA files such as co-op disputes. So yeah, that's the new housing law clinic. We've sort of expanded our mandate beyond the residential tenancy branch dispute resolution tribunal level to move more into Supreme Court and higher levels of court. So obviously with all of us working at home, we aren't currently meeting clients in person, but we're trying to the best of our ability to keep those programs moving forward through digital meetings, video conferencing, phone, email, and sort of those digital forms of communication. So those programs, again, to the best of our ability, are moving forward. Legal workshops and webinars, obviously we're not doing any in-person workshops right now. We're happy to continue to do HSABC webinars. We're also looking at getting our own webinar software and possibly doing some webinars for the general public moving forward. Plain language publications, I believe in the past I've given somewhat regular updates on our tenant survival guide, which is always a really popular publication. We've now submitted an application to reprint a large batch of those. Very optimistic that we will get the funding, and if or when we do, those can be ordered in bulk through the Crown Publications website. And so we'll have an update for everyone when that funding does come through.
Andrew, could you turn up your volume just a touch? I know you turned it down a bit, but yeah, that's
sure.
Good. Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay. Website. So we're actually just redeveloping our website. We received some funding from the province to redevelop our website, and we're getting closer and closer to launching. So keep your eyes open for that. Social media, you know, we're not huge posters on social media. I think moving forward, we'll try to do a better job of that with, you know, this whole COVID-19 being such an evolving situation and wanting to keep everyone up to date. The other thing we do through social media that's very popular though is we have our advocates, Susanna Modrovic, Michelle Bida, Rob Patterson. If you've reached out to Track before, you probably know who those individuals are. They all respond to Facebook messages on a daily basis. So it's a very popular resource that we offer. So we don't have a general email address that you can contact us with general questions, but that's how you can submit something in writing to us through our Facebook page. Our online course is still up and running. We actually have funding to redevelop that as well. So that's something that's a little bit taking a back seat right now with everything that's going on, but down the road, closer to the end of the year, most likely we'll be relaunching the existing course and also launching some new content for the course. And finally, just on the bottom there, obviously Track engages with all levels of government, particularly the residential tenancy branch at the provincial level, and advocates for enhanced protections for residential tenants. And so that's something we've been really focusing on over the past couple of weeks. Okay, so hopefully everyone who has who's taking part in this webinar is aware that last Wednesday, the Premier and the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing had an announcement. And so much of that announcement will be contained in this PowerPoint. I just want to point out, that overall we were quite pleased, pleasantly surprised with the announcement. The problem is that nothing's been made official yet. Nothing's actually come into effect. So I just want to share a quote that we received last Friday from a residential tenancy branch representative. So the proposed changes are supposed to come into effect through an order under the Emergency Program Act, which is currently being drafted. Government expects to have it finalized and signed by the Solicitor General shortly. So yeah, we're hoping, this happens today or even tomorrow, but that's straight from the government there. What was announced on Wednesday is coming shortly. So the number one thing TRAC asked for, and the focus of the announcement was an eviction moratorium. So we're still trying to figure out exactly how everything's going to play out when it comes to some of the more complicated cases here, but generally speaking, all evictions are on hold. They've been halted. Again, as soon as everything is made official here. So yeah, any eviction notice that's even served will be of no effect. Now there's the issue of, what happens with eviction notices that have been issued before the moratorium takes effect. We're still waiting to learn more about that, but I mean, to be safe, if your client, just receives an eviction notice right before the moratorium, and they can dispute it. I know there's lots of issues right now with access to justice and even being able to have the means to challenge notices right now. But if you're able to, it's still safest to dispute any eviction notices that you've been served before the moratorium takes effect. Now, the other really important thing to note here is that the RTP will be halting the enforcement of eviction notices, meaning no orders of possession will generally be issued. So, you receive an eviction notice, you challenge it at the residential tenancy branch level, you and the landlord both present your case to the arbitrator sides with the landlord, they're going to issue what's called an order of possession. And so the RTB is saying no orders of possession will generally be issued. Now, for those of you who have gone to one of these hearings or participated in one of these hearings, you're going to know that almost all hearings, over 99%, are done over the phone. And so for this reason, the RTB is feeling fairly confident moving forward with their hearings. That being said, TRAC has relayed some concerns about some of our province's more disadvantaged and vulnerable renters who could be experiencing access to justice issues right now that would affect their ability to have a fair hearing. So, all RTB in-person services have now been suspended, which, is obviously an issue for those who, maybe can't access the online issue. People who have disability, mobility issues or disabilities. So there's major access to justice issues right now. And so we've told the RTB, you have to take these clients into consideration and maybe relax your rules around arbitrators adjourning hearings, evidence timelines, willingness to accept late evidence and adjourn a hearing. So the RTB is currently working on amending the rules related to those topics. one final point, you know, all this being said, there are still going to be situations where, you know, for extremely urgent and serious cases, landlords will still have a process to apply for what's known as an early end of tenancy. So in cases where, you know, the physical health and safety of the landlord or tenants or the property is being compromised, the landlord can still use the residential tenancy branch's expedited hearing process to get an order of possession. So yeah, so generally speaking, there's an eviction moratorium, but for emergency situations, landlords still could successfully get an order of possession.
Have you seen any of this happening yet, Andrew? I know April 1st is coming up.
Yeah, no, we haven't really seen any of this happen yet. I mean, if by mentioning April 1st, you're talking about sort of, you know, tenants being unable to pay rent,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
that's certainly not going to be one of the grounds on which a landlord can apply for an early end of tenancy,
Okay.
right? Like, you know, not paying rent is definitely not a reason for a landlord to get an early end of tenancy.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so I mentioned the order of possession that an arbitrator at the RTV level can issue. What a landlord can then do with that is go to the BC Supreme Court and apply for a writ of possession, which then allows them to hire a court-approved bailiff to physically remove the tenant. So again, you know, there's going to be this moratorium. No eviction notices will be of any effect, but there's all these situations where, you know, again, eviction notices have already been issued. There are orders of possession that have already been issued. There are writs that have already been issued. And so sort of what happens with all these more complicated situations. And so TRAC is trying to confirm right now whether or not the BC Supreme Court has stopped issuing writs of possession when a landlord presents their order of possession. And so we're still trying to figure that out right now. And furthermore, TRAC is trying to confirm whether or not court-approved bailiffs are still enforcing writs of possession. We heard one report from an advocate that at least one bailiff company said they're definitely not going to remove anyone who is sick. I don't know how much proof you have to have of that, or if it's, you know, you stick a notice on your door saying quarantine because sick. Maybe that will be enough to scare someone away. But yeah, again, we're still sort of a little bit in the dark here and trying to figure out what's going on with existing orders of possession, existing writs of possession, in terms of what's happening at the BC Supreme Court level and with the various court-approved bailiff companies around the province. We obviously have some time for questions at the end here, and maybe some of you out there have had experience with that, so I'd love to hear about that. So, you know, we've heard a lot of tenants complaining about landlords threatening to physically remove them, threatening to evict them, you know, even for things like non-payment of rent, which we've already discussed is, you know, you can't be evicted right now for not being able to pay your rent. So as April 1st comes around, I can see unfortunately some situations where landlords do try to physically remove tenants in an illegal manner. And so keep in mind that the RTB does have their enforcement and compliance unit that they created a little while ago to intervene in really serious and urgent and time-sensitive matters. So that unit is still up and running, we've been told, and they have investigators who can actually go out into the field and investigate different situations. They can issue letters and warnings and sort of get the administrative penalties process working. So they do have some power. We've heard some really good stories about their effectiveness since being created. So keep that in mind if your client is facing a really serious issue where there's an illegal lockout or an attempted legal lockout. The RTB's enforcement and compliance unit is still up and running.
And Andrew, just to clarify, it doesn't matter where a tenant is getting their income from, whether they're on income assistance or something else, you still can't evict anybody right now for non-payment of rent, hey?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. No tenant can be evicted for non-payment of rent right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is something that we are also trying to figure out and get to the bottom of. There are lots of tenants coming to us saying, I issued my 1 month notice to end my tenancy, last month, and or in February, and it's effective tomorrow, and I obviously don't want to move. There's nowhere to move to. I don't want to move. And there's lots of tenants who issued their 1 month notice sometime in March, and it'll be effective on April 30th. So what happens with these tenants? We're trying to get clarification from the branch if there's any sort of exception to the rule for these people who don't want to leave their home, because we've been told to all stay in our homes and social distance during a public health emergency. And we're still waiting to hear back from the tenancy branch about this. My assumption at this point is that unfortunately these individuals are still supposed to move out. However, keep in mind that if they don't move out, there is an eviction moratorium, and the landlord cannot evict them for overholding the unit. At least my understanding is that definitely wouldn't be one of the grounds on which a landlord could apply for an early end of tenancy. The application for an order of possession for an early end of tenancy, should have to involve a tenant endangering other tenants, or the building. It as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't involve something like overholding the unit. So we're not advising anyone to do this necessarily, but just so you all know, that is one option that you or your client would have, I suppose, right? You have to sort of balance the pros and cons of this. There could be some consequences down the road potentially, but in the moment right now, you can't be evicted for overholding the unit, as of tomorrow or the end of April.
And the other thing is that I've been hearing reports that moving companies are not taking clients, and nobody's renting out their place. So, there's an argument to be made there that there is nowhere to go.
Exactly.
And there's no way to move staff out, right?
Exactly. And so we've definitely let the RTB know about this concern of ours. And so I hope they provide some guidance today, really, considering tomorrow's the 31st.
Andrew, the other question that's popped up here is that a lot of people are saying that their clients are saying, oh, we don't have to pay our rent now because of what's happening. Can you just speak to that? Because you can't get evicted for not paying your rent, but
I believe what the the premier said was, if you can pay your rent, obviously you're still supposed to be paying your rent. I'll get into this a little bit later, but this is sort of phase one of the government's plan here, right? This is sort of in the moment, let's focus on the public health emergency. Let's focus on keeping people in their homes. But yeah, down the road, what's going to happen to someone who, you know, who doesn't pay rent as of, Wednesday? Yeah, are they just going to sort of kick the can down the road, and that person can still be evicted, in the future? I certainly hope not. But yeah, we're still sort of waiting to see what's going to happen here. I'll get into this a little bit later in terms of
Sure.
what TRAC's stance on all this is. I think we're hoping for some sort of rent forgiveness program, but yeah, I suppose the official stance from the premier was, obviously if you can pay your rent, continue to do so. But at the same time, you can't be evicted for not paying your rent. But again, we don't know what the consequences, if any, of that will be down the road.
Yeah, so the 10-day eviction notice for non-payment of rent is no longer valid in this period, correct?
In this period, yes, correct. My understanding is that, yeah, any 10-day notice that's issued is of no effect. So
Right.
the tenant doesn't even have to dispute it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Okay, so aside from the eviction moratorium, the other big ask that, the other big thing that TRAC recommended was around access to individual rental units. And we were quite pleased with what the government came out with. So they basically said there are now enhanced protections around landlord entry and landlord agent entry. So we were hearing stories from tenants whose landlords were still wanting to have open houses and let in the handyman to do routine maintenance and stuff like that. And it's during a time when when the tenant just wanted to quarantine and social distance as they've been instructed to. And so the government has now said that landlords and landlords agents can only enter with the tenant's explicit consent or for emergency situations. So that's for entry into individual units. There's also the issue of landlords trying to restrict access to the broader building. And so what the government has come out and said is that the landlord is allowed to restrict the use of common areas by tenants or guests. And so the key word there, or phrase there, is use of common areas. So as far as we understand, if you are a senior who relies on a friend or a family member to come by and provide some support in terms of dropping off groceries or whatever, that still has to be allowed, but landlords can now impose restrictions on the use of common areas. So I think the examples used in the announcement were, if you have a games room or an entertainment room, that can be closed, or landlords can set a maximum on the number of people in the shared laundry room, which are, totally reasonable measures to take. Rent freeze. So I put this in quotation marks because I feel like some people misinterpreted this. It's not a moratorium on rent payments. It's just that landlords can't raise rent during the moratorium. So I had a friend text me the other day. They said, I received a notice of rent increase 3 months ago, and it was supposed to go up. Our rent was supposed to go up April 1st. What happens? And the answer is no. So rent won't increase April 1st. No rent can increase during this current crisis that we're facing during the moratorium. Financial assistance. So this is the $500 per month that the Premier referred to. Honestly, I've heard conflicting reports that it would be a $500 per month payment for 3 months in some sources and 4 months in others. Like all of you, I'm still trying to figure all of this out myself. But it's for 3 or 4 months. You can apply for $500 as the tenant, but the money would get sent directly to the landlord. So really, it's a landlord benefit here. And we're still waiting for the application process to be released. But again, hopefully that's today or tomorrow or any day now.
Yeah, and what I've heard actually is that it's tied to an EI application. So you have to first prove, from what I understand on the Government of Canada website, you have to first prove that you've applied for EI and that you've lost income due to the crisis. And then out of that, you're able to apply for the rent assistance.
Correct. And yeah, just to clarify one other thing, it's up to $500 per month. So exactly what you said there. Sorry, you have to demonstrate need based on how you've been impacted due to COVID-19, and you can receive up to $500. I believe it's $100 to $500 you can receive.
And people are asking about the kind of proof that's necessary. We don't know that yet because
no idea.
Even the federal government has said very clearly you don't have to show hours, and you don't even have to have a what is it? An ROE, the layoff notice to qualify for EI. So I would imagine that they're working on a similar means test here at the provincial level, but we're still waiting to see exactly what that would look like.
Exactly. And I did just want to point out, I mentioned, we do a lot of systemic advocacy work, submission of recommendations to government around, how to properly care for and protect tenants. And so I just wanted to sort of mention that, this is going to be an ongoing process advocating for protections, for tenants, due to COVID-19. I think, what was announced on Wednesday, and especially when it comes to the financial assistance that was announced, those measures will help renters survive this crisis, but much more is going to be needed down the road to help them actually recover. Right? There's a lot of renters who have lost their job and are in the hole and will never recover the income that they'll lose during this time. And so, there's no point in just, postponing an eviction until later, right? The Premier in his announcement said that no tenant will be evicted due to COVID-19, and we plan on holding him to that, right? If in 6 months' time after the moratorium is lifted, there's still a tenant who is, struggling to get back on their feet and repay, their rent arrears, they still shouldn't be evicted down the road there. And at the same time, it wouldn't be fair for landlords to never be repaid the money for the money they've lost in rental income. So we're throwing around a couple of ideas right now, but I think we'd be in favor definitely of some sort of rent arrears forgiveness program, and we're looking into how feasible it would be to have some sort of landlord rent bank for lost rental income. So it would be it would really be much more efficient for for one landlord to directly apply to government for, say, an entire building that they manage than it would be for all the renters in that building to individually apply to the government and then get the compensation, then have to give that to their landlord. We feel like it could be really a much more fair and efficient process. So anyways, these are just sort of what's on our radar and what we're thinking about moving forward. But yeah, it's going to be really tough for a lot of renters to to ever sort of pull themselves out of this hole that they're in due to this crisis. So we'll be thinking of them moving forward.
We've got lots of questions around the rental subsidy, but let's come back to that at the end after you finish this section, hey?
Sure, sounds good. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, most residential tenancy branch dispute resolution hearings will be moving forward. I think that's great. You know, one of the changes that I don't think it was announced verbally by the Premier or the Housing Minister, but it was in the news release, was something around how email will now be considered an approved way of serving documents. And I think, you know, this is something that I think the RTB was moving towards anyways. It was certainly one of the recommendations that Spencer Chandra Herbert and his rental housing task force recommended to the Premier and the Housing Minister. So yeah, this was definitely a positive, you know, to allow service of documents in email. Again, we're still waiting to learn about that a little more. But yeah, in terms of access to justice, again, all RTB in-person services have been suspended. And not only that, but the vast majority of legal advocacy groups in-person services have been suspended. So again, you know, TRAC isn't meeting any of our clients in person. And, you know, I don't think there are many groups or similar groups to TRAC who are meeting clients in person. So that obviously is problematic for seniors, persons with disabilities, and other renters facing barriers. You know, I think of, you know, the senior in the West End who doesn't have internet and, you know, has mobility issues and, you know, doesn't have a actual office to go to. What do they do? And so, you know, we've really tried to drive home this point to the residential tenancy branch that, you know, you are going to have to consider these vulnerable renters during this time. And you know, I think they've heard us. As I mentioned earlier, they're working on amending some rules around adjourning hearings and increasing timelines for evidence and things like that. So yeah, again, I feel like this is a theme of the presentation, but we're still waiting to learn more about that, but hopefully it comes soon. Now, if any of you have clients who end up facing access to justice issues, so, you know, if an arbitrator, you know, proceeds with a hearing that they, you know, they shouldn't, because the client, you know, would be prejudiced due to, you know, not being able to adequately access the online service, or, you know, just in general wouldn't be allowed to have a fair hearing, please let TRAC know. A reminder that the new housing law clinic that I mentioned earlier does judicial reviews at Supreme Court, and so that's for, you know, when the residential tenancy branch, you know, really messes up, when there's a, you know, a real serious concern around procedural fairness or natural justice. That's where we can apply to the Supreme Court to have a judge review the case. Okay, and this is just the final slide. I just wanted to throw it in there. You know, not all people who pay rent to live somewhere are tenants under the Residential Tenancy Act, and, you know, if you're not a tenant under the RTA, you can't access the residential tenancy branch's dispute resolution system. So for instance, if you are a there's certain roommate situations. If you're part of a homestay program, you can't access the residential tenancy branch. Any disputes would be done through the Civil Resolution Tribunal. And I received an email from Shannon Salter, who is the chair of the tribunal, and she just wanted to let us know that they're amending some of the rules around extensions. So if you need an extension, you can email info@hsa-bc.ca. And then they're also relaxing their fee waiver requirements. I think their fee waiver guidelines are already quite low. The standard is already quite low, but you can also email the same email address there if you have any questions about a fee waiver at the CRT.
Okay.
Okay.
So we all have questions, even Andrew, but let's just go through thematically here. There's you won't be evicted for not paying your rent. So what's coming up in the comments is that a lot of people are seeing their clients choose not to pay rent because they need that money for groceries and to survive, right, maybe due to layoffs or lack of funding or support that they usually rely on. As well, there's a trickle-down effect on landlords in terms of mortgage payments. So, choosing not to pay your rent for survival reasons is valid, but then people are just asking questions about landlord relaxations, which is sort of outside of the scope of this presentation, but I wonder if you just want to talk a little bit about that whole area. I know I've already asked you and you've already said, please pay your rent, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's true though. Like if you can afford to pay your rent, but then that doesn't leave anything for anything else, then that's not good, obviously. So it's I can't tell you, I really can't tell you what to do. Each case is going to be situation is going to be case by case. We really just don't know down the road what's going to happen in cases where, say, a tenant doesn't pay rent on the first year, right? Like, will there be consequences? I would hope not. Maybe it'll depend on sort of proving that you truly weren't able to pay rent, and if if it's a case where someone really could pay their rent and they just chose not to, then maybe there could be consequences. I really don't know. Like, I'm just sort of, we're still just in the dark here. I know the premier's message was, pay rent if you can. But really all I can say at this point is that, a landlord can't evict you right now for not paying your rent. I know TRAC's stance is, going forward will probably be, we need some sort of rent arrears forgiveness program, to really address the issue and help renters recover. But at the same time, we are sympathetic to landlords, especially small landlords who are suffering right now and have mortgages to pay. I know there's been mortgage deferral programs put in place for some of those landlords, and but at the same time, I don't think that applies to everyone. So we're certainly sympathetic to those landlords. I obviously don't have a perfect answer here, Sarah, but
no, that's okay. I think it's okay. I think what's very clear is that if you are not paying your rent on April 1st, you cannot be evicted at the current time. The other thing we know for sure is that landlords cannot raise rent right now, as well as it sounds like you're confirming, but it's sort of colloquially known that orders, writs, and bailiffs will not be mobilized to enforce those orders.
Yeah, we're sort of hearing different reports from advocates who are trying to investigate into this, and yeah, might have to go back to the slide there, but yeah, I think it's quite hard right now for someone to it's quite hard for someone right now to get a writ of possession. So if you have a landlord who already has an order of possession, it's going to be quite difficult to get a writ of possession, which is the thing you need to then hire a bailiff. And yeah, if you already have the writ as a landlord, as far as I'm concerned, and again, everything's changing on a daily basis, but last week, I think there were still bailiff companies that were enforcing those writs and physically going to tenants' houses and trying to evict them physically. Right. But we did hear from one advocate that they heard from one company that, you know, if you can show that you are sick, then they're not going to remove you. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah. Okay. So then there's two sort of streams here. One is that people are asking about rent banks and anyone that you recommend or any resources that TRAC might have in terms of rent banks across the province.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I know the rent banks are, you know, already at max capacity. They're just swamped. Like, I think the solution is for the government to step in here with something, you know, stronger than just, you know, what the existing rent banks are currently, right? This is much bigger than just, you know, the current rent banks that exist. Yeah, I mean, again, from TRAC's perspective, I think the key was to sort of stop the bleeding right now, keep people in their homes by having an eviction moratorium, and then as we move forward, advocate more for some sort of rent arrears program for renters and some sort of application process for landlords. You know, the landlords who are, you know, losing rental income due to this pandemic that's out of their control. You know, why not allow them to apply? Showing that they, you know, they manage this property of this building, and you know, all of their tenants were unable to pay rent. You know, we're completely sympathetic towards those landlords, and I think they should be, you know, be able to get some financial assistance from the government. So yeah, rent arrears for renters, and then some sort of robust program for landlords. You know, I just think that would be the more fair and again also more efficient way of doing it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get back to a couple more questions here. What is a valid reason for a tenant to be evicted at this time? So what does the landlord have to prove?
Yeah, so basically if a you know, tenant is doing something super serious that's you know, endangering the safety of people or property, basically. So yeah, if we go back to,
This took us back to the eviction slides here.
Yeah, I guess I could, yeah, there is wording in the actual Residential Tenancy Act, but you know, yeah, it's basically something extremely urgent and serious where, yeah, again, the tenant is endangering people or property. And then, you know, it would still be a situation where the landlord would have to prove their case to an arbitrator, right? So it's still, you know, evidence-based and sort of up to the arbitrator's discretion.
Yeah, I think what I heard was that I think the language around danger is used. So a danger to others or to property.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so great questions, everybody. I'm working through them here. We're going to come back to the subsidy, the rent subsidy, but I just want to bring up an example here from someone, and that is one of their clients received a notice to evict in January due to repeated late payment of rent. And this serves as a good case study, but they didn't challenge it. And so based on that notice, they should be out tomorrow. But the government's announcement was that the eviction freeze was immediate. So what would your advice be in this scenario? Because I think it might be applicable to a lot of people who might already have eviction notices, but are now wondering if they need to move out or tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a great question. So again, we're still waiting for some clarification from the branch, but my understanding is that that notice might still be effective, but the tenancy branch won't be enforcing it, right? So the tenancy branch will not be issuing orders of possession, except in those situations we just talked about, right? Really dangerous, serious, urgent, illegal, behavior type cases. So yes, that client might be, they might be supposed to move out tomorrow because it was an eviction notice that was issued previously. It was undisputed, but I mean, if they don't move, there's no way for the landlord to go to the branch and say, okay, now I want an order of possession. They're not going to give an order of possession for that. So if the person doesn't want to move, they can stay and know that it's going to be extremely challenging to impossible for the landlord to then go to the branch and, start the process of physically removing them, basically, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's sort of like, depending on how things shape up in the future, that notice to eviction is still in effect, but it might not be enforceable for a while.
Exactly. So, and so that's what we're still waiting to see what happens in the future. Right? It's like once this moratorium is lifted and the RTB starts, issuing orders of possession again, is that landlord going to instantly get an order of possession effective in 48 hours, or will there be some sort of grace period? We're still waiting to figure that out. But, the person, for our understanding is that person is safe to stay where they are now because there's no, order of possession that the landlord can obtain. But down the road, once this moratorium is over, there could be reasonable conflict. There could be consequences, right?
Mm-hmm. It's almost like as an advocate, we have so many caseworkers and counselors on the line. There's probably a balance that you're going to have to find
definitely
with your clients. So one is the short term. Yes, survive, stay safe, do what you need to do to protect yourself, your home, and your family during this crisis that we don't have answers in. But the other theme that's coming out here for me is, as a caseworker, you have to be thinking a little bit ahead about potential consequences. So it might mean right now you're counseling people to stay in their homes, but it might mean that you're still sort of thinking about developing a plan for down the road and being aware that there might be consequences later. And obviously, we're all trying to follow the public health orders, as well as to encourage our clients and our community to do that. And I don't think any government at any level is wanting to make more people homeless at the moment. But it's definitely that balance between the two, the short term and then the long term, that we might need to be working and supporting our clients through. That might just need to be in the back of our minds, hey?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so keep your questions and comments coming. Someone's mentioned that on the North Shore, they've just started up a recent rent bank called Harvest, and there are some other ones out there. We might try to put together a little list for you and send it along through HSABC after this webinar is over. Just a couple questions around the rent subsidy. And I know that we don't even have the application yet, so we don't know how to prove and who's going to apply and all of that. But are any of these kind of programs going to be accessible to people that are living on reserve or if a landowner on reserve has units that they rent. Do those protections apply to either the landlord or the tenant, or do those programs apply?
Really not sure at this point. I would certainly hope so, but we're still waiting to hear more on that.
Yeah, so you mentioned let's just come back to that because I think it's important. When we do a normal webinar around tenants' rights, we talk about things like co-op housing and BC housing and SROs as being part of a different, what's the word? They're not necessarily
Not covered under
covered
the
under the
resident.
Act.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you just maybe outline that again for everybody? Because we do have lots of different kinds of clients. A lot of them are in SROs, group homes. Yeah.
Yeah. So SROs are generally covered under the Residential Tenancy Act. Hotels, including single room occupancy hotels, are covered under the RTA as long as a tenancy agreement is in place. But yeah, there are some exceptions. I mentioned some roommate situations, homestay programs. In terms of the roommate situations where you have a situation where, say, there's a head tenant renting out a floor in a house, say there's 3 bedrooms there, and one tenant rents out the 2 others as sort of the head tenant, and enters into sort of a contractual agreement with 2 roommates there. Those 2 roommates aren't covered under the Residential Tenancy Act because they're not dealing with the actual landlord of the property. So that's a situation where the Civil Resolution Tribunal would be your recourse if you did have any disputes. Yeah, so there are some exceptions to sort of housing that isn't covered under the Residential Tenancy Act. I believe it's section 4 of the Act, if you wanted to look up all of them. Student housing would be another example.
Yeah, there was the recent, because of media and protest, UBC was going, University of British Columbia, which is a separate entity than the City of Vancouver, was going to continue to up their rent on a regular schedule. And students especially, and people living there in student housing, started to complain. And the president came out and said, yeah, that was just a mistake. We're not going to do that. So it does underline the importance of advocacy and sharing your stories. If you're dealing with clients who are in a situation that is unclear, get the word out, because it seems to be that that kind of sharing of stories is actually causing advocacy to happen and changes to be made. So now UBC is not enforcing any rent increases. They've put a rent freeze in addition.
Good. Yeah, and certainly going forward, track will be advocating for renters in general. Anyone who pays rent to live somewhere. In terms of financial assistance going forward. It shouldn't matter if you're the roommate who pays your roommate for rent and are and not covered under the Residential Tenancy Act. That shouldn't really matter. It's we're all being affected by this. So it'll be sort of all renters in BC that we'll be advocating for, not just quote unquote tenants as defined by the Residential Tenancy Act.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you. Andrew kind of pulled this together because April 1st was happening.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of you are wanting specific information, especially around the rent subsidies and how that's going to work. And so we'd like to do another one of these when the application process is up, when we have a little bit more information. Andrew, we'd love to have you back to follow up and do another check-in on this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you everyone for bearing with me here. It was it was a presentation I put together kind of quickly, and yeah, it's frustrating. Still sort of waiting to hear more details on a lot of what we cover today. So thank you for bearing with me as sort of yeah, quickly put this together and delivered it for the first time. So
Yeah, but
I'd love to keep, yeah, I'd love to do another one in the future, Sarah.
good. And I think, the important things to come out of today so that you can help your clients, especially on April 1st, is that nobody's getting evicted right now. Or if they are, it's because it's a dangerous situation. And even then, it's up to the landlord to prove that. And they'll have to
Yeah.
go through the RTB, and then that will take some time. So I think what we can reassure our clients who might be facing evictions is right now they're safe. And we don't know everything, but we know that we have a little bit of time to figure it out. So
Exactly.
thank you, Andrew, and thank you to everybody on the line. I just want to share with you that HSABC has put up a special section on our website called Sector Resources. You can see it here, and that has all of the handouts, all of the webinar recordings, everything to do with the coronavirus crisis that we've put together for you. So that will include today's handout and this recording, as well as updates on future webinars that we're doing. And just before we leave here, I want to reiterate, because there's a couple more questions. Now, no landlord can harass or intimidate or force anybody to move out right now.
Correct. And again, the residential tenancy branch has their enforcement and compliance unit, and you can contact them if there's any sort of threat of an illegal lockout or something along those lines.
Yeah. The other thing I just want to mention as a resource, which has come up quite recently, is at bc211.ca. Thanks to one of our members for bringing this up. bc211.ca is a special helpline. You can call 211 as well, and it's for seniors and vulnerable people. So there's some resources there specifically that might apply to our clients. All right. Well, thanks everybody for taking time out of your day to be here. I know that we're all facing a lot of uncertainty, but thank you for showing up. Thank you for doing the hard work of figuring out and translating what your clients and the people in your community need to know. And hopefully we'll see you back again. Again, I will send out an email with the next update from Andrew and the next time that we come back together and work through more of the news that's coming out from the government. And again, that helpline is 211 or bc211.ca. Thanks, Andrew, so much for being here today.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone.
Here's all the ways that you can contact TRAC. So if you are facing, they are advocates, and they do, I mean, as Andrew mentioned, which I don't know if you noticed, they were the ones who got in touch with the government and helped to shape the policy that has come out. So please get in touch with them if you are facing a situation that you know they could help you advocate for, or any specific questions. They're very ready to help and to talk to you.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever, it's important to have good communication, between advocates and service providers and whatnot. So sorry, I thought our direct line was on there, but again, so if you want to call me directly, my number is 604-255-3099, extension 222, or my email is just my first name, Andrew, at tenants.bc.ca. So yeah, please do feel free to reach out.
And take care, everyone. Stay safe, stay calm, and if you can, stay home. All right. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.